From the national headquarters of RT America, right here in our nation's capital. Hello again, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez. Look, I don't know what you do for a living, but there's a really good chance that if you make a mistake in your job, say a miscalculation or a misjudgment, or you forgot to do something, chances are it will not cause the deaths of hundreds and hundreds of people, right? Very few people can actually say that they have that type of responsibility. That is why when somebody has a job like that, they require some type of government oversight. If you're, let's say, the CEO of an airline or an airline manufacturer, you have a job that can cause the deaths of hundreds and hundreds of people like that. And that's exactly what Boeing and its CEO are now apologizing for.
On behalf of myself and the Boeing Company, we are sorry, deeply and truly sorry. As a husband and father myself, I'm heartbroken by your losses.
This really is a major screw-up, which is why the Boeing CEO is now being grilled by Congress. What's this all about? Well, it really all comes down to a type of software that Boeing installed on its planes that didn't work. And here's the problem. There may be evidence now that Boeing knew that it didn't work. What is it? It's called an MCAS. It stands for Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. I know, a lot of big words, right? But it's essentially a feature that's supposed to bring down the nose of a plane when a plane is in danger of going into a stall. So it brings down the nose. It automatically recognizes it and fixes things, right? Well, it didn't work. And the head pilot for Boeing, a fellow named Mark Faulkner, he files a report saying so. He said the MCAS system has, quote, issues, and that it made it difficult for pilots to gain control of the plane. In other words, to control the plane. 2 Boeing 737 MAX planes crashed because the pilots, right after takeoff, one 7 minutes, the other one about 11 minutes, could not gain control of their own plane. Boeing now admits that they knew about the problem before the second crash. There were messages that were going back and forth, essentially confirming that. But neither Congress nor the FAA were told about any of this until much later.
Now, what I find truly stunning, Boeing handed this exchange over to the Department of Justice in February. In March, I chaired a hearing of the Aviation Subcommittee on these 2 crashes. Boeing did not see fit to give this committee that exchange, nor did Boeing give it to the FAA or the Department of Transportation. But what I find most stunning is your testimony here today that you said you first learned of this exchange a couple of weeks ago.
That's Ted Cruz. He's not a happy camper. Neither were many of his colleagues. How does something like this happen? And what's it say about Boeing? This is the News with Rick Sanchez, where we believe it's time to do news again. We're going to kick things off with our A block and a look at Boeing's folly. The 737 MAX still grounded. Boeing is catching heat from all directions, and its CEO seems to be all but admitting that his company made a big mistake. We begin our coverage tonight with RT correspondent Faran Fronczak.
This is CEO Dennis Muilenburg's first appearance on Capitol Hill ever since those 2 fatal Boeing 737 MAX crashes. Ironically, it's also the 1-year anniversary of the Lion Air jet crash that killed all 189 souls on board. Now, Muilenburg entered the Senate hearing room Tuesday, surrounded by families of the victims of those 2 crashes. Families holding up large photos were all raised directly behind Muilenburg, who appeared very focused and unemotional. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, the chairman of the Commerce Committee's Aviation Subcommittee, says the panel plans on asking how was the plane designed without safety mechanisms that happened not once, but twice? How was the regulatory system designed? What were the incentives within the regulatory systems to sign off on these changes? And why were pilots not trained on this, adding that's what prior 737s had, but not the 737 MAX? Now, before the 2 crashes, Boeing touted to major airlines around the world it was a fuel-efficient plane and didn't require time-consuming training.
You're the CEO. The buck stops with you. Did you read this document? And how did your team not put it in front of you, run in with their hair on fire, saying, we got a real problem here?
Chairman and Mississippi Senator Roger Wicker says his biggest question: did Boeing and the Federal Aviation Administration rush to get the Boeing 737 MAX before certifications and safety measures were totally ready? This after emails and the tens of thousands of other documents House lawmakers have reviewed in their probe, drawing questions about Boeing's culture and its race to get the 737 MAX out, all to win over airlines to top its chief rival, France-based Airbus. Here's some of what Muilenburg said Tuesday in his hearing.
I didn't see the details of this exchange until recently, and we're not quite sure what Mr. Faulkner meant by that exchange. His lawyer has suggested he was talking about a simulator that was in development in that time period. That's where he was working. That could be the case. We don't know.
What that was referring to was last week text messages between two pilots from 2016 show there may have been problems with the 737's automated flight control systems years before the first crash. One of the test pilots texting the other, "It's running rampant in the simulator on me," and he worried the performance had him basically lie to the regulators unknowingly. Now, these hearings come just 1 week after Boeing let go of one of their top executives, who was the head of the commercial airlines division, Kevin McAllister. This after the company says he handled the company's largest point of business, relationships with airlines, poorly. McAllister faced growing internal scrutiny about his handling of relations, in particular alienating important customers following the two 737 MAX crashes. The 737 has been grounded since March, and it cost the major airline company $8 billion. Commercial business relations are more than 60% of Boeing's total revenue.
These tragic crashes have made it all too clear that there should not be any distinction between critical and non-critical safety-enhancing features. And that's why I've introduced my Safety is Not for Sale legislation. My bill will require aircraft manufacturers like Boeing to offer or provide any technology that measurably enhances safety without an additional charge to airline carriers.
Why didn't we ground that aircraft a lot sooner so that another tragedy wouldn't happen?
As Senator, we have asked that question over and over, and you know, if we knew everything back then that we know now, we would have made a different decision.
Last week, CEO Dennis Muilenburg was demoted from his position as chairman of the board, but he does remain as one of the chief executives. And Rick, that is actually one of the biggest questions Tuesday on Capitol Hill. Why is Muilenburg still a part of Boeing? Well, Texas Senator Ted Cruz says that that's not a government decision, that's a shareholders' decision. Chairman Wicker says that the Senate panel is determined to work with the families to get them the answers they need and also to hold those who are at fault accountable. For the news with Rick Sanchez, I'm Faran Fronczak, RT.
And as usual, great work, Faran. We thank you for that. And there's Jamie Finch, former NTSB director. Two things going on here that we have to examine. I made you director. You were an official, but you were one of the directors of one of the divisions.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
The tongue lashing, the embarrassment, the major screw up that the American people have just witnessed at the hands of this CEO who seemed like he had his tail between his legs. But even more importantly, that tongue lashing, that embarrassment, does it lead to more delays with the grounding?
Yes, this is going to lead to more delays. I mean, it's not like the FAA is going to go out next week and recertify this thing and have it up in the air in the next couple of weeks. We're now pushing into, I would say, March, April, somewhat, early spring, late spring, possibly early summer. Because not only are you going to have the FAA, but you're also going to have the delays because these other world global authorities, aviation authorities, are going to do their own certification process. So I'm very nervous about what it would look like for the American people if the FAA all of a sudden comes out and they certify they can fly in the U.S., but can't fly anywhere else in the world.
What is your reaction to what we reported just a while ago, that this CEO, and I imagine other directors in this company, knew that this system, this feature, this software did not work and failed to do anything about it, really, except internally?
Well, I mean, to me, I call foul whenever I hear the Muilenburg say that he didn't know anything about this until just a few days ago and all this other stuff. I'm sorry. These decisions are not made on the shop floor. These decisions come from the top down. And so this has not been something that the workers for Boeing made and decided that they were going to do these changes and so forth. This was a financial decision. This was a decision decision for them to get this plane up in the air to beat the Airbus Neo.
And the top pilot, the head pilot, the guy, the top guy who's supposed to find these problems, filled out a report saying so, right?
That's correct.
There's no way that report did not get to the desk of the CEO of the corporation.
Of course not.
There's no way.
No.
And so the question then becomes, the fact that he didn't do that, Jamie, does this go beyond just the fact that we're upset and he caused danger and may have killed so many people, or even a civil lawsuit? Is there criminal negligence here?
It could possibly be. I mean, that's obviously up for the court, up to the courts and so forth. And I imagine because of Boeing turning this information into the Department of Justice, that looks like there's some investigation going on there to see if there's criminal activity that's occurred. Now, so we'll let the justice system take care of that. But in the court of public opinion, I mean, come on, you've got a CEO that's just now coming in and saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and so forth. You know, who's begging basically for his job at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine that he's really going to stay. I mean, and quite frankly, I think he deserves to go, as well as other people there and at FAA.
Begs credulity. Begs credulity. It does indeed. Jamie Finch, as usual, thank you so much for your insight on this. So you haven't heard that we're the ones covering the stories that you won't see covered anywhere else? In Venezuela, Kazakhstan, let's go to Hong Kong. And the media reaction to that has been crickets. How about the way we cover those stories? What the hell does that mean? Huawei, Huawei, Huawei. That's the key word in this case, uprising. Keep, can you believe that? Watching. This is the right thing for members of the media to do, to actually pick sides. Look, if you like what you see, subscribe.